We're all here. I can't believe how fantastic it is to welcome you. My name's Mary Stewart and I'm the Director of National Life Stories, and I'm here to welcome you on behalf of the British Library and National Life Stories. The event has been worth the wait, I'm very, very sure, and you've got a very brief introduction from me before we have an array of fantastic speakers and a wonderful film to watch. I'd like to thank our British Library events colleagues, particularly Jonah, who's loitering by the doors here, for their patience and perseverance as we rescheduled this event twice. I really want to thank the Crick for hosting us. It's wonderful for us to be at our near neighbour. And thank you to the AV team who'll be recording and managing all of the audio and film tonight. You have all been given, and if you haven't been given one, there's some at the front door, the National Life Stories brochure, which lists an array of all of the different projects and activities going on from National Life Stories at the British Library. We're the oral history charity that was founded in 1987 and is housed at the British Library. Lots of our project materials are available online, archived interviews in full, also some wonderful learning resources, and we still have an active interviewing programme. So I've given you all something to read on the way home, so please enjoy that. If you want any more information about National Life Stories, please do let me know. All of our contact details are there, and our Twitter hashtag and our website are also on the holding slide. But without further ado, I think it's time to start the main activities and what we've been waiting for. I'd like to start off by introducing Amanda Game, who's a valued National Life Stories trustee and has a special interest and fondness for our Crafts Lives project. So over to Amanda. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much, Mary. My role tonight is to give you a quick but very focused pitch for Crafts Lives at National Life Stories, and then introduce Suzanne Joinson, who is doing some research based on that archive. But tonight we are being introduced to and are celebrating the life and work of the innovative British textile artist and weaver Anne Sutton. You can hear more of Anne's life story online after this event, as between 2002 and 2004, Anne was interviewed by Hawksmoor Hughes for the Crafts Lives archive at National Life Stories. Crafts Lives was initiated in 1999 by Tanya Harrod, a long-term scholar of craft, in collaboration with the founder of National Life Stories, Paul Thompson, and with the subsequent help of Rob Perks, the then, following Paul, director of National Life Stories. Between 1999 and 2018, over 160 long life interviews were conducted with makers in fields as varied as textiles, ceramics, glass, bookbinding, furniture, metalwork and jewellery. What you will hear tonight about Anne in these different forms, from Suzanne and from the film, how her knowledge connects and reflects so many important aspects of art, industry and society, is wholly reflected further within this archive of makers' voices. For example, one can hear about the importance of open borders to innovative practice in an extraordinary early interview undertaken by Harrod herself about the life and work of the jeweller Gerda Flockinger, who came to Britain in 1938. Or you can hear about the creation of an object that symbolised political change in a different way, as silversmith Michael Lloyd talks about his work on the Scottish mace for the newly inaugurated Scottish Parliament. In 2018, the trustees of NLS paused the Craft Live interview programme to research and develop new ways of funding and disseminating these voices in the future. Crafts Lives have benefited over this period from nearly 300,000 from many generous funders, including the Keatley Trust, the Rousing Trust, the Jerwood and the Goldsmiths Company. But of course, COVID and economic downturns have created new hurdles for the project. However, plans are emerging to create a new web resource, working title Voice of the Maker, within the British Library digital science resource to highlight Crafts Lives and disseminate these voices that are so important. Additional funds, now listen closely, for this are now being sought. Please contact Mary after the event or by email to hear more and find out how you can help. NLS and Crafts Lives also benefited from the long-term support from the art and crafts patron Sir Nicholas Goodison, who chaired NLS from 2003 to 2015. The NLS £5,000 Goodison Fellowship encourages research into and dissemination of many aspects of NLS collections, and it was named in his honour. The 2020-2021 Goodison Fellow is Suzanne Joynson, here on my left, who joins us tonight. An award-winning writer, reader in creative writing at the University of Chichester, published novelist and regular writer for the New York Times and The Guardian, Suzanne has a strong interest in the interconnections between the lives and works of artists. This is being developed with this fellowship by exploring the life narratives of 3 female artists, all based in southern England, all recorded by NLS: Juliet Pannett from Artists' Lives, Barbara Mullin and Anne Sutton from Crafts' Lives. Suzanne, you will now tell us a little more about your research, your interest in Anne, and the importance of this interview process.
Thank you. First of all, thank you, Mary and Rob and everyone here for inviting me along. And it's amazing to see such a spread of people interested in Anne's work. I have had the great pleasure of ferreting about in the sound archives, listening to Anne's stories. So I've got the challenge today of not doing any spoilers for the film, whilst, as Jane's looking at me, whilst also saying a few things. So what I'm going to do is start with a little clip, which I have on good authority is going to magically appear. So we're going to hear Anne in her own words from the sound archive.
I went up to Attingham Park, which is near Shrewsbury, for a conference. It's very lonely working as an independent craftsman or artist, really. We all wanted to meet others, and so we would go to conferences organised by the organisations. And this was organised by the Society of Designer Craftsmen. And I remember my suitcase had just been taken by Sir George Trevelyan, who ran Attingham, who was a furniture maker himself. And he was just saying, I'll take you up to your room, because there were about 100 people at this conference. And I heard a voice saying, oh, I just heard you check in, I've been writing to you. And it was Makepeace who'd heard me check in, you see. And I said, can't speak to you at the moment, I'll find you later on. So I went up and followed my suitcase up. And then came down and took my seat in a lecture being given by Bernard Leach, who was very respected by us all as Britain's premier potter. And he said, in the middle of this lecture, he said, I don't know why it is that you young people, you young makers, craftsmen he probably called us then, think you've got to find things out for yourselves. We've found things out. Why on earth can't you just take it from us? And 2 of us in the hall shouted rubbish, very rudely, because this was a venerable old man, you know, and we felt so strongly about this, that this was the wrong way to go, not to make personal journeys, you know, but to take it from him.
Some of you in this room know Anne very well, I'm sure, and others are new to Anne, so hopefully you get a sense of Anne's sense of humour. But I think that clip's really interesting because it tells us a bit about her unique combination. We know she's a brilliant storyteller, first of all. We get a sense of her engagement with the cultural atmosphere of that time, characters and figures of that time, the movements of that time. She was, young Anne was taking part in a conference with the Society of Designer Craftsmen, so mingling with the great and good of that time, but also quite irreverent, a little bit rebellious. We can tell there's something going on. There's somebody who's confident, knowing talent. There's somebody who is asking questions, causing a stir, perhaps, but at the same time is deeply and seriously engaged with the world of arts and crafts at that time. And so I think that clip gives you a sort of taster of those combinations of factors. So the National Life Stories Archives is a phenomenal resource. So if you're working on or thinking about or exploring a particular, in this case, craftsperson, the methodology of the National Life Stories is unrivaled in terms, I think, in terms of biographical information. So each interview will be 8 to 15, am I right, Mary? So 8 to 15 hours, so really quite in-depth and long. And the methodology is to start with talking about grandparents. So in Anne's case, it's her grandmother in Stoke-on-Trent, I think. And then move chronologically through. But of course we know memory doesn't work in a linear way, so we'll be dipping and diving, we'll be thinking about the family relationships, but also education, the art movement, the kind of, and I say this knowingly, the tapestry and the weaving of the sort of combined factors that go into making a successful, or even not so successful, but not in the case of Anne, successful artistic life. So, you know, the commercial side of things, what it takes to be an artist, what it takes to have a lifetime of working in the arts, what it takes to survive, what it takes to be a female artist, geography in the provinces of England at certain points in history and time, what that means. So the magic of these interviews is that the whole thing is kind of connected, and it gives you a multi-dimensional feel to the story. So for me, as a writer and a researcher, it's just time travel mixed in with this rich sense of depth, and of course the stories unfolding in Anne's own words, which is a magical thing in itself. What I found that I could do in terms of using these archives is I could create these maps. So for example, I would listen to Anne talking about what she was doing in the 60s, which might mix from who she was hanging out with to a particular art show of that time, what she was selling, and the commerce of art mixed with the domestics of life for me is very fascinating. I find the connection of those two things very interesting. So for example, there'll be a section where she's talking about the book she's publishing, so the structure of weaving in 1982 and ideas in weaving in 1989, now recognised as seminal texts in weaving, sold globally, pioneering in those senses, and I can map those textbooks to the exhibitions that she had, to the catalogues and all the ephemera. I could trace something, for example, a key work of that time, which might be the Diminishing Square Knit from 1965, and that pushed the boundaries of sculptural, of weaving into sculptural form in an incredibly pioneering way. And then I can look at how that relates to some of these performative installations that she did. So the largest piece of knitting in the world, 1970, which feels like something that would happen now. The largest, fastest weaving in the world also feels like something that would happen now, 1984. And there's a timelessness and a brilliance to these things, and how they link to something more recent from 2021, a piece called Diminishing Lines. So there's a kind of, there's the added advantage of longevity, I suppose, and we can map across, but to draw on the voices and Anne's own memories and stories connected to the trajectory of her artistic output and life, she's that horrible word, output, is really fascinating and interesting. So, having researched Anne's archives and working on them, and having the privilege of hearing her memories and how she spent, and having spent time in her company, I feel like her stars are aligning at the moment. And it seems like probably a lot of you in here would think the same. The themes include weaving of life and art. Sorry, teaser weaving again, it just keeps coming into my head. The weaving of life and art together. The teaching life mixed with the artistic life, I think is very interesting. People who have roles, people like Anne who have roles in education, spreading mentorship, skills, not just through text but also as a teacher. Navigating the shifting trends, such as, in the worlds of craft and revival, textile arts, visual arts. And then latterly, correlations between ageing and legacy, thoughts around legacy and creativity. So all of these for me, and hopefully all of you here, all combines to create a very profoundly inspiring story. And so I highly recommend you go and listen to the National Life Stories archives, and in particular, but all of them, they were wonderful. And so hopefully I'm on time, yes. So it gives me great honour to introduce the screening of this wonderful documentary, My Bones Are Woven, directed by Jane Moat and Joshua Kershaw. And I just want to say before we start that at the end, Jane is going to be in conversation with Anne Cox from the Tate, and it's going to be a discussion, Q&A, so please, we look forward to that. Thank you. Over to the screen.
We got there in the end, and also to the Francis Crick Centre for having us. We have a short amount of time, and I'm going to be talking to the wonderful Anne Coxon, as Anne would say, and I will as well. And also we'll have a bit of time to ask questions, if you have any burning questions at the end. So, what was it about Anne Sutton that attracted you?
Well, first of all, I think I'd just like to say it's really the wonderfulness of Anne Sutton that is reflected in any of the statements that you just made, and of course was more than apparent in the film there. Nothing to do with me at all. But like she said, it was a case that back in 2018, I was co-curating an exhibition of the work of Annie Albers at Tate Modern, and becoming increasingly interested in weaving as a means of expression and art making. Seems to be going on and off, sorry. And lots of people started to say to me, well, you really have to meet this wonderful weaver, British weaver, Anne Sutton, and a combination of, like she said, meeting people who have been her mentees and her students, and also reading, I think, a review or a piece written by Tanya Harrod, who's also been mentioned tonight, saying, it's fantastic that Tate Modern are doing this show of Annie Albers. It's been a long time coming that finally the big Museum of Modern Art is looking at the practice of a weaver, but wouldn't it be great? We'll keep going. Okay, we'll just carry on. There we go. Wouldn't it be great if the British part of Tate's collection, which is shown, of course, at Tate Britain, would also pay the same attention to our established British weavers? And so it really went from there, and I went to meet Anne, and of course was completely in love with her.
And what is it about her work that attracted you?
So, I guess having been thinking about Annie Albers and about the possibilities that are set up with this very basic premise that is the nature of weaving, which is the crossing of the warp and the weft threads. And all that can be explored and all the different permutations and possibilities that can come out of that very, very simple premise. This is something that I brought to my meeting with Anne, and then of course hearing about her work and how she has really made it, I guess, her life's work to explore what it means to weave, whether that's weaving with paint, as we saw her do many, many times there in the film, or whether it's weaving on an enormous scale from the windows of a building, or weaving with paint in three-dimensional space, or, you know, I think that the fact that somehow, really at the heart of what she's doing, she's taking that very, very simple rule, or that simple premise, and just playing and playing and playing and playing and playing with it.
But how did you choose those 4 pieces? Because they're very different. Aren't they?
Well, I can't take any responsibility for that. So that was my colleagues at Take Britain. And so having met Anne, then of course I said, well, you know, we're quite divided, so I'm really a curator attached to Tate Modern, and I don't get to sort of say what's acquired for the British part of Tate's collection, but I will introduce you and bring along, in fact, to meet you, the people who do, and one of my colleagues there, and they make those decisions. And I think that they chose 4 pieces from the 1960s, which we saw in the film, and you know, those were the things that were being packed up. And in fact, you know, I did say it would take ages for this to happen. This is a very slow process, but actually, you know, for Tate it wasn't too slow, considering there was a pandemic going on, and they came and they picked up those works. And my next mission now, my next motivation is to get them on show.
Oh, that would be fantastic. And her playfulness is the other thing that you mentioned there, and that's evident in everything, isn't it?
Completely. I mean, it's just such a wonderful film that you made, Jane, because it really, really captures everything about the way that her remarkable mind works, the way that Anne's remarkable mind works, and there's just absolute joy and total motivation in the possibilities of what you can do with physical materials and ideas and thought when those things come together. And that's really what art is all about.
Well, I think the film was made obviously because Anne had such an incredible spirit, and it was a real pleasure for me to spend that time with her, and to realise that being so creative can give you such energy, because that's really what she's got, isn't it? Are there any other questions from the audience? There are some mics, or you can shout if you've got any questions about the film or about the work at the Tate, or anything that you want to know about Anne. Just shout out or put your hand up and I'll pick you. Everyone's being very quiet. Yes, Caroline.
Hi, it's Caroline. Can you tell us a bit about how you made it? How long it took you? How much footage you must have? Because I thought the editing was fantastic. I didn't get to see it. But,
thank you. So we've just had a question
the process of making it.
about how long the film took and what the process was.
Yeah.
Well, I work in Arundel, and Josh, who co-directed with me, and I decided it would be a good idea to make a documentary, and I had just interviewed Anne because she set up the Arundel Gallery Trail, and I'd been told by everybody in Arundel, you must go and meet Anne. And she was such a powerful person. You know, she said something like, you know, I love doing things on the edge because no one's ever been there before. And I thought, right, I need to spend some time with this lady. So I thought, I'll make a documentary because then I've got an excuse to see a lot of her, which is what happened. And we really, it was unfunded, so we just fitted it in amongst our commercial work. And that was great because she was down the road. So we nipped in and out, and of course COVID got in the way. So it took just over 2 years. And I think it's a moment in time. I'm so glad, and I would say to anybody who wants to tell stories, whether they're oral histories or otherwise, to do it now. Because that moment has gone, really. We had that moment where you know, there was a lot of opportunity to access Anne and to be in there, and you know, there was an energy to it all, and you can see how things change so quickly. And so I'm really glad that we did what we did when we did it. But I saw Anne last week, and she's still going up to the studio without stairlift yet. And she is firing on all cylinders, and she's just amazing. So I would love to have kept going, to be honest, but I had to get out of her life finally. Well, on film terms, not otherwise. Any other questions? Yes, the lady next door, Jane. There's a mic coming for you.
I was really interested in this more technical decision that you must have made not to name people as one normally does. If it's a news report, their name will flash up across the screen, it gives a name and who they are in relation to Anne. And I thought, oh, now why is Jane doing this? And then I thought, you gave credit to all the names at the end, and I thought, are you trying to weave these people in and out of her life in the way she weaves everything in and out of her life? She just takes people, she takes things, she takes bits of wood, she takes Kit Kat wrappers, whatever's available, and makes something of it. But I just wonder what your thinking was about that.
I think I didn't want it to be a biography. I didn't want it to be a very sort of talking head standard biography. I wanted it to be a story, and I think what you said about capturing her essence, that's what I was trying to do, and I didn't want to be interruptive by introducing people and being formal. I suppose the only time we did that a bit more was in Shetland. I wasn't actually able to afford to go to Shetland because it was the middle of summer, so Josh went on his own and had to do the interviews as well there. But Anne did actually film for us en route as well on the ship, because the other thing I wanted to show was just how modern she is. I mean, she's always used the latest thing. You know, she's there on her iPhone doing the photograph. She's straight in during COVID times.
Did she have a TikTok account?
Probably. I mean, she certainly is on Instagram and Facebook, and she'll be catching up on all of this on all of those platforms. So, you know, it's I wanted it to feel as natural, as much of, you know, a snapshot of a moment in time in her life. And I don't know, Anne, from meeting her, whether you think that represents how she is when you meet her?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think all those of us I'm seeing people who, you know, are in the film, in the audience here, and people who she knew or knows and continues to see, and, you know, you really get a sense of exactly that's what, you know, like, brought back to me memories of being in the studio with her and just seeing her in her creative world, in her creative environment, and everything about her, it comes through the things that she surrounds herself with, as well as the things that she says, and the way that she is, and the way that she lives, and all of this, I think you just captured so brilliantly in the film.
Thank you. I say it was a privilege, and I think all of us have those times where we think about getting older, and then you meet Anne, and you think, just don't even think about it, just get on with life. And she certainly left me with that impression. Are there any other questions from the audience? Yes, the lady in the middle. I think they're going to bring a mic, if you don't mind. It's just coming now.
Hi, lovely film, thanks. It's sort of perhaps a question for Anne. The pieces that have been bought by Tate Britain were from the 60s. And my question is, why didn't Tate buy the 4 pieces in the 60s?
Yeah, well, I don't think I was even born yet, so no, I get the point of your question. It's actually a good question, because it has taken a very long time, I think, for museums of modern art to get beyond this kind of classification of art as being something to do with painting and sculpture, and, you know, I mean, you can see how absolutely, you only have to watch the first 5 minutes of that film to see how absolutely ridiculous that is, really, with somebody who is a creative individual and who doesn't care whether it's a Kit Kat wrapper they're using or a piece of, you know, plasticized paint or whatever it is, the creative endeavour that they're engaged with, and the rules they're setting themselves and the questions they're answering through playing with materials and media are all part and parcel of the same thing. And so I think that I believe quite strongly and quite passionately is that, you know, it and actually that many contemporary artists now are also you know, coming to the same conclusion and really opening things up and getting rid of those old traditional classifications and boundaries. And so I think, to answer your question, why has it taken so long? I don't know, but I mean, you know, isn't it time that we just see creative practice as creative practice, whatever that may be? And, you know, I mean, I suppose one could also say, I could sit here and say, well, Anne Sotton's in the Tate collection because she was taught by Kenneth Martin and Mary Martin, and there's a relationship between them and British constructivism and blah, 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 blah. But actually, I don't want to say that. Because I want to say, isn't it just that she's a great artist? You know, she's just a very interesting and creative and joyful and the kind of artist who makes you see the world in a different way and brings something of the essence of herself to the world.
What a great place to end on. Unless there's a burning question. Oh, just one burning question, lady. Yes? Do either of us weave? Do you weave?
No, I did. I'm seeing Margot Selby here, who did show me a bit about, in a brief workshop about what it means. One of Anne's previous students, and you know, Master Weaver herself, who gave me a very short amount of time to explore what weaving means, and I've tried it a few times, and I felt that actually, in the time that I was working on the Annie Elmers exhibition, I felt I can't really actually write about what it means to weave or why she was trying to do the things she was doing without trying it a bit, at least, to understand the basic principles, or else it's just going to be ridiculous to try and really talk about this. But no, I'm absolutely not a weaver.
And Josh bought me a weaving kit at the end of making the film. I'm afraid I haven't opened it yet.
I'm really sorry, but we need to leave. Ends our event. It has been so fabulous to be able to welcome you all here on our third attempt. I think you'll all agree it has been worth it. Thank you.
Thank you to Connor as well, who's here, who actually did all the post-production.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you,
Thank
Connor.
you, Connor.
Thank you to the Crick. Thank you to you all. We need to leave promptly so that we can keep a good relationship with our neighbours. Please take all your cups and anything you've got with you and leave it on the table outside. Take an NLS brochure and go home and listen to lots of Crafts Lives interviews. Thank you very much indeed, everyone.